So for Work Together 12-2, what we're doing is we're taking a look at items that are going to be withheld from your paycheck. In 12-1, we went through and we looked at each person and we calculated how many hours they worked. We took a look at how much they get per hour, any overtime they earn, and then they would calculate their total earnings. We have regular earnings, we had overtime earnings, and we had total earnings. That is always the first step for any type of payroll, even if you're salaried, because we talked about yesterday how I am a salaried employee, but there are extra things that I do that I get paid for beyond my regular teaching, accounting, and business. Does anyone have any idea what that would be? FBLA. Anything else? All teachers tend to do it. You see them at various things sometimes. Well, concessions is actually part of FBLA, so it would be covered under there. But like if you go to a football game and you have to buy a ticket, there's usually a teacher or somebody there selling you a ticket. So those are going to be extra duties. So sometimes I have to go through and see if I do those types of activities that I get paid for. But when we take a look at that, you have to calculate your earnings, because your earnings are going to be what determines how much you have for deductions. And yesterday we talked about the types of deductions that we're going to have. And I said that we have federal income tax. On my paycheck, I have state income tax, but we're not calculating state income tax for our accounting class. But if you did, it would be done exactly the same way. We talked about insurance, Social Security, Medicare, different things on there. So when we go through to complete an assignment like we're looking at for 12-2, it says for each employee, the first step is to determine the federal income tax that must be withheld and use the tax withholding tables in this lesson. So that's why I said you have to have your book, because in the book is that tax table. And I shared with you yesterday that you don't have to have a tax table memorized. On the test for this chapter, you just need to know how to use the tax table. And in this example, they don't have the tax table in the instructions. That's why you need to have the book. Now, remember yesterday my example, Ellie and I started at Don's at the same time. We get paid the same amount of money, same amount of pay per hour. We work the same number of hours per pay period. Who has a bigger take-home check? I do. Why? Because I have kids, right? Again, they're about this high, and the government then says because I have people that I'm claiming as my dependents, I don't have to have as much taxes taken out as somebody that doesn't. So, two things that you have to take a look at when you take a look at determining someone's federal income tax. The first thing you have to know is, are they married or are they single? Okay, because you will have one chart that is going to be for married, and the married chart is on page 348. Okay. And you will have a different chart if you're single, and that single chart would be on page 347, correct? So that's the first question you have to look at. And then the next thing, after you determine married or single, then you have to take a look at what their earnings are. And their earnings are going to run down that very first column, starting top to bottom, and you will notice it says at least, but less than. Okay? So this is where it gets a little bit tricky when you look at this chart, because you will see that 740 is listed twice on there. If I'm looking at the married chart, do you see where 740 is twice? Because it says but less than 740, but at least 740. Okay? Instead of them writing $739.99, they wrote 740, because isn't that a little bit neater? So if I earned exactly $740, if that was my total earnings, I would have to go down to the second row because I've earned at least $740. I didn't earn less than $740, but I earned at least $740. And sometimes if they fall right on those numbers, students will accidentally go across and pick the wrong one. So if I earned $740 and I have 4 dependents, what is my tax? Earn $740 with 4 dependents. Yep, at least $740, but less than $760, 4 dependents. I got to go all the way across. What is my tax? 0. Do you see it? What if I had 1 dependent? 39. 29, sorry. Do you see where 29 is? Now if I'm single. Single, you must have to do what? Okay. You'll notice that they give us a little bit different breakout on there. You have to look in your tax table. You got to know how to do this. I just said 348 and 347. Okay. So if I do the same amount, if I do 740, but I'm single, and I have 4 withholdings, what is my tax? $12. Do you see that? Now what if I had 1 withholding? $62? Okay. So again, it's not hard. You don't have to memorize anything, but you need to know how to use your tax table. First question you always ask yourself, married or single? Then you have to find the amount, and then you go across to your withholdings. Okay? So let's go ahead and do that for our first set of employees here. Again, we're on page 347 and 348. So employee number 3, Eric Bates. What page are we going on for Eric to determine his federal income tax? Which one? 348. Why? Because he's married, right here. Marital status is listed as married. Okay, so the total earnings that we have here for Eric is $1,090. So you have to find that on the chart. Now, is 1,090 exactly a number listed on there? No. So which one is it going to fall to? Yep, so at least 1,080, but less than 1,100. And so then how many withholdings do we have? So remember, the first column for our withholdings is 0, so you actually have to go to the third column. So what is Eric's federal income tax withholding? 50. Okay, now let's go through and do all of our federal income tax. So I'm going to go down and do Jason next. So Jason means I need to switch my book to page 347. Because Jason is single and has earned $840. Now, $840 is one of those numbers that are listed there, so we have to go to at least $840, but less than $860 with 1 withholding. So what is Jason's federal income tax withheld? $77? Go ahead and do Christy and Sharon. So after you've calculated your federal income tax withholding, then we would do step number 2. And step number 2 says calculate the amount of Social Security tax and Medicare tax that must be withheld for each employee. We're going to use a Social Security tax rate of 6.2 and a Medicare tax rate of 1.45. Then it says none of the employees have accumulated earnings greater than the tax base. Okay, this is a halt. Don't do your math, because these are going to be questions that you're going to get on the test when you have to understand the concept. So the first thing we have is we have a vocabulary term that refers to payroll taxes. And payroll taxes are all taxes based on the payroll of a business. So kind of uses it there. We have income tax, which is going to be our federal tax that we just calculated. When you first get hired on a job, you're going to fill out that W-4. That's the form that you fill out that you would state your withholding allowances. If you've been working there and you want to change your withholding allowances, you can do that at any given point for any job. All you have to do is get a new W-4, turn it into your HR department or whoever does payroll, and then they will, at the next payroll that they can do, is they would change their withholding allowances. Okay? And your withholding allowances are going to be used what we determine to see whether or not where you fall on your federal chart. Same thing would hold true for your state chart. Okay? But we're not calculating it here in accounting. Now, the next thing we have is our employee Social Security and Medicare. Social Security tax is a federal tax paid for old age survivors and disability insurance. So, for example, my mother-in-law was living in Good Shepherd for several years, and she was disabled, so she collected Social Security. Okay, not because she was at retirement age, but because of her disability that she had received from a medical incident. So she received Social Security. There is also something that everyone pays in your taxes called Medicare Tax. Medicare Tax is a tax paid for hospital insurance. Okay, we go through and we report these separately, but sometimes on your paycheck it may be called FICA. Okay, and FICA is the combined Social Security and Medicare. Now, Social Security tax is calculated based on your earnings up to a maximum amount that happens within a calendar year. And a calendar year means January to December. Okay? So what happens is Congress will go through and set the tax base for Social Security. And they will go through and they'll say, okay, this year, once you've earned this amount of money, you no longer have to pay Social Security tax. Okay? So an act of Congress is going to be what is going to set that. Based on our numbers for the accounting book, we're going to say that it is going to be $87,000. Okay? So that means once you earn more than $87,000 in a calendar year, you don't pay Social Security tax. Now, how many people do you think would exceed that tax base of $87,000? I don't. Would your parents? Do they earn? Does your single parent, like your mom or your dad, earn more than $87,000 in a year? Okay, I wish. Okay, my parents don't either. So, well, here's why I'm bringing it up. Because a lot of people are going to earn less than $87,000 in a year. So that means they're always going to pay Social Security tax. Now, let's think about the people that are very wealthy. Okay, one of the people I think that's very wealthy would be Donald Trump or Mark Zuckerberg, right? Okay, Bill Gates. Now, how long does it take them to earn $87,000? Not very long, right? Let's say a month, just to make it simple. So for 1 month, they will pay Social Security tax. Now, the rest of the 11 months, how much do they put to Social Security? 0. How often are you paying towards Social Security? Every paycheck. I have always paid towards Social Security since I first got my job, which was just last year, by the way. Yep. Does that make sense? So there is a tax break there for people that are wealthy that don't have to pay that additional tax. So it's a little bit of politics when they talk about Social Security and funding Social Security, because we have a lot of people within the general population that will always contribute to it. Then you have your wealthy that are getting a tax incentive or a tax break that the general public is not getting. Does that make sense? But again, an act of Congress is going to be what's going to set that amount. And right now it is, for our accounting book, is $87,000. Somebody do a quick look up and see what our tax base is for Social Security right now. Actually, it's not $87,000. Somebody give me that number. It's a quick Google search. Social Security tax base for 2016. We find it? What's that? 118,000. Yep. So that sounds about right. So that means to the point that you earn that amount, you're going to pay Social Security. Once you earn over that, you don't have to. Now, here's the thing. That is per employer. So if I earned, let's say that I was a wealthy person and I worked for this business and I earned $200,000 for this business, but I also worked for another business and they paid me $100,000 as well. Each business that you would go ahead and you would pay up to that tax base. So when we go through and do that, it's really important when we're calculating payroll at any given point, I know what your total earnings are and yours and yours and yours, because it is not going to be the same. You may have some employees that would exceed that tax base faster than others and some that would never achieve it. So when we're thinking about it, it's really important that we always have a business model set up that we can say at any given point, what are your earnings? Now, think about your last paycheck you just got, for those of you that have a job. On there, does it give you your YTD earnings? What does YTD mean? Year to date. So that's standing for your calendar year. Somewhere on your paycheck, and Alex, if you logged in under your employee payroll, you'll find it on there, because we don't get paychecks, but they give us an employee portal to log in to check to see what our paychecks are. On there, it's going to give you your YTD, your year-to-date earnings, because you can see how much you've earned so far this year, because some people go through and plan, hey, once I get to that $118,000 that it is right now, then I know I'm actually going to have more take-home pay because I'm going to have less taxes taken out. So they go through and plan life a little bit differently. But each person has to always know at every paycheck what your earnings are. Okay? So we need to know, and in here it tells us none of the employees have accumulated earnings greater than the tax base. You will have an assignment in this chapter where some people have exceeded the tax base. Here's the thing. In our book, what's that magic number? 87,000. So let's say on this paycheck right now, I have earned up to $86,500. And my next paycheck, I have total earnings of $1,000. How much am I going to be taxed on? $500. Okay? Because I was at $86,500, I get taxed all the way up to $87. Once I go over $87, I don't get taxed on it. So on that $1,000 earning, I would only have to pay tax on that first $500. The rest of it would be all without having tax on it. And that question will come up when we're working the assignment, and you're going to have questions, and you're going to want to ask me. Okay. So we are going to use our handy-dandy calculator. And we are going to take and calculate our Social Security tax. So I'm going to take the total earnings, which is going to be $1,090, and I'm going to multiply that by my tax rate for Social Security. And my tax rate for Social Security is 6.2%. But I'm going to multiply that by 0.062. because I converted that into a decimal point. Would you agree? And then I hit equals, and that's going to give me $67.58. So I'm going to go ahead and put that right here for Social Security. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for Eric Bates for his Medicare. I'm going to use that same number, 1,090, and I'm going to multiply that by my tax rate for Medicare. And for this book, our tax rate for Medicare is what? 1.45. So I'm going to put that in the calculator as 0.0145. So 1,090 times 0.145, and that's going to, I'm going to hit equals. And that's going to give me $15.80.5. What do I have to do with that? I have to round it. Okay? So is that going to give me 80 cents or 81? It's going to give me 81. So $15.81. If you don't round correctly, it's going to get everything wrong. Now, let's think about what we did yesterday for Application 1. Yesterday, Application 1, you calculated your total earnings. What happens if you miscalculate total earnings? What's going to happen to all of these withholdings? They would be wrong. Slow down. Double check your work. Right now, it's not too bad because we know what the earnings are. So you can go ahead and do the same thing for Jason. Now, it doesn't matter right now if they're single or married because they're all going to be multiplied by the same percentage. For Social Security, for Jason, 640, we'll multiply that by 0.062, $52.08. $12.18 I got for Medicare. For Christy, I'll take the 1,020 times 0.062, gives me 63.24. $14.79 for Medicare. The main thing for calculating this, it's not hard math. You just got to use the right number, and we always find our withholdings based on their total earnings. Whoops. I got all my work together done correctly. How'd you guys do? Rockstar? Don't worry about it on your own. Let's take a look at our application problem.